It's been a little while since we heard about the federal probe into Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida. When last we left him, just a few weeks ago, Gaetz's associate, remember him, former Florida tax official named Joel Greenberg, pictured there with Matt Gaetz and Roger Stone, pleaded guilty to 6 charges, including sex trafficking of a minor. Agreed to fully cooperate with federal investigators. Now, that's bad news for Congressman Gaetz, who himself is under investigation for, apparently among other things, sex trafficking that same minor. Investigators are looking into whether he had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old and paid for her to travel with him. Gaetz has not been charged with any crimes. He's repeatedly denied any wrongdoing, but now he's facing, apparently, a new problem. Politico reporting that federal prosecutors are examining whether he obstructed justice during a phone call with a witness in that sex crimes investigation. Ariana Berg served as federal prosecutor in both the Southern District of New York and the Northern District of California, and she joins me now. I'm always curious about how kind of the crime and the cover-up relate to each other in terms of obstruction investigations, right? So there's some underlying misconduct that might be criminal, and then there's some conduct after the fact to obscure it. How do prosecutors treat those in this kind of investigation?
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on tonight. As you mentioned in your lead-in, the reporting is that Representative Gaetz is being looked into for obstruction of justice. Now, oftentimes we think of crimes like substantive crimes, child sex trafficking, for example, Mann Act prostitution cases. Those are the sort of substantive crimes that we typically think of when we think of criminal cases. But obstruction of justice charges are equally important. It's important to know that those can be charged as a standalone crime, meaning that even if investigators in this case do not develop enough information to charge Representative Gaetz with the sex crimes that they're reportedly looking into, they still could charge him with obstruction of justice. And those charges are incredibly serious. Under the sentencing guidelines, which are the guidelines that federal judges look to for guidance in how to sentence crimes, obstruction of justice faces a minimum guidelines range of 15 to 21 months in jail. So they really are quite serious if proven true.
Yeah, the pattern you just identified there, or the sort of precedent, right, was what we saw largely in the Roger Stone prosecution, right? Stone it wasn't obstruction, but it was perjury, right? That he perjured himself under oath, that he also lied to Congress. And Stone was convicted unanimously by a jury of his peers. He then was, sentenced, and then he was pardoned by the president. So there's some precedent here. I want to just read what investigators apparently are zeroing in on and get your reaction to it, which is this: the obstruction inquiry stems from a phone call some witness who's been talking to federal prosecutors had with Gaetz's ex-girlfriend. At some point during the conversation, the ex-girlfriend patched Gaetz into the call, sources said. While it's unknown exactly what was said, the discussion on that call is central to whether prosecutors can charge Gaetz with obstructing justice, which makes it illegal to suggest a witness in a criminal case lie or give misleading testimony. So, generally as a lawyer, right, you're advising someone in that situation not to be talking to anyone, any witnesses whatsoever, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. If I were Representative Gaetz's counsel, I would absolutely tell him to shut up at this point. He really should stop talking because, as we can see, he's exposing himself potentially to more criminal exposure. And what's important to know here is that obstruction of justice, to me, as a prosecutor, if someone is working so hard to essentially do witness intimidation, which is what the reporting is sort of alluding to here, trying to influence a potential witness to alter what they otherwise would testify to in court or speak when they're speaking with criminal investigators, then that shows me that there's some consciousness of guilt here. What is he working so hard to cover up? And so, in fact, while it may be a standalone charge of obstruction of justice, it might end up bolstering any evidence that the prosecutors have of any substantive crime like sex trafficking.